the World Heritage Site, as well as the global links this afternoon, because that fits in with our Cornwall at home and away theme. So over to you, Ainsley.
Hello, thank you, Chloe, for that introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the this instalment in the Crescent Kerno Cornwall at home and away virtual presentations. My name is Ainsley Cocks. I'm the Research and Information Officer for the Cornish Mining World Heritage Site team. And today I'll be taking you through the World Heritage Site itself, what that's all about, and introducing some of the international connections associated with that. Okay, first up. Why is it important? What are we talking about here? This is a fantastic Cornish mining scene. This is West Wheal Halls and Wheal Edward down in the St Just mining district in the far west of Cornwall. And I've included this quote at the top from Dr. Roger Burt because I believe this sort of sets out the Cornish mining context, particularly in the 19th century, very well. He says, Cornwall, in relation to copper mining particularly, was probably the most important mining district in the world, and he's talking about the mid-19th century here. I think that's quite an important statement, quite a bold statement in many ways. Cornwall's a very small part of the world, it's a very small part of Britain even, and for it to have made that degree of global impact, I think is quite remarkable. So, starting at basics, what are we talking about regarding World Heritage? What is World Heritage? World Heritage is a UNESCO, a United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization designation. And this all came about through UNESCO signing or putting together the Convention concerning the protection of cultural and world heritage and natural heritage in 1972. And for cultural and natural world heritage sites, this is defined as cultural and natural heritage around the world considered to be of outstanding value to humanity. And for cultural heritage specifically, and the Cornish Mining World Heritage Site is a cultural World Heritage Site, that's described as monuments, groups of buildings and sites with historical, aesthetic, archaeological, scientific, ethnological or anthropological value. So what are UNESCO's aims for its many World Heritage Sites? There are over 1,000 World Heritage Sites around the world currently, and the obligations of individual signatory state parties, that's countries with World Heritage Sites around the globe, basically fall into two main camps. The first of those are mandatory, they're required of state parties, and that's the preservation of a particular site's outstanding universal value. Now that's an interesting term, and it's a UNESCO term specifically which refers to the international significance or importance of any given World Heritage Site. Under that preservation requirement, you have to protect heritage assets, whatever those might be in any given site, and to take opportunities to conserve and enhance those heritage assets where that's appropriate, desirable, and indeed possible. On the encourage side, so this is kind of more the sort of optional side of it, as it were, we have all the social benefits that hopefully come about through World Heritage Site status. First of those is public awareness, and that's raising awareness of World Heritage Site status generally as a designation, and specifically what outstanding universal value means in that context. Also, local community participation, that's engaging with local communities within World Heritage Sites to get them to hopefully better appreciate the World Heritage Sites they have and all the heritage associated with those. And finally, we have international cooperation. UNESCO particularly likes World Heritage Sites around the globe to share best practice management knowledge where that's possible, and other areas of cooperation. But also we, in Cornwall and West Devon, we have a particular international connection, which makes us particularly special in my view, and I'll get onto that a little bit later on. Cornwall and West Devon mining landscape, that's the proper UNESCO name for the World Heritage Site, but we've referred to it as Cornish mining for the most part for just convenience. Our World Heritage Site is somewhat different than many in the fact that it's a serial World Heritage Site, and it comprises 10 separate locations from St Just Mining District at the top of the list there, which is in the far west of Cornwall, right through the Central Mining District, the Camborne and Redruth area, the Gwenet Mining District, a fabulously productive area for copper particularly, the Highland area at Carridon in the east of Cornwall, and finally to the Tamar Valley and Tavistock in the far west of the site far east of the site in West Devon. So those are the 10 areas, 10 separate areas, which together comprise our single World Heritage Site. If we look at a map, some of the text might be a little bit small here, but this map shows the 10 areas color-coded, again from the St Just Mining District here in the far west of Cornwall, through to the Hale, Port of Hale on the north coast, the Dragoning and Gwynear area, Camborne and Redruth, Central Mining District, Gwenep area, St Agnes area, and then to mid Cornwall we have the Luxillian Valley and the port of Charlestown, important copper shipping port. We have the moorland area at Carridon Hill, north of Liscard, and finally we have the Tamar Valley Mining District, the orange area, and you can just about see right at the edge there the town of Tavistock, which was an important mining town. Just to give you a little more figures around the World Heritage Site, just to put it into a little bit better context, hopefully. The World Heritage Site is 19,710 hectares in extent, and it's the largest industrial World Heritage Site in the United Kingdom. That's approximately 76 square miles. The majority of the landscape of the World Heritage Site is in private ownership, not public ownership. And around 90,000 residents live within the 10 World Heritage Site boundary areas. The World Heritage Site Office and the Partnership Board, which is its governance body, owns none of the site, none of the World Heritage Site, and has no direct managerial control. The World Heritage Site Partnership Board coordinates the management of the World Heritage Site through the delivery of the management plan, our World Heritage Site management plan, and the various policies contained therein. Why is it important? Well, principally it's because it was a major producer of copper, tin and arsenic through the 18th and particularly into the 19th centuries. Why were those minerals important? Well, copper as a metal, as a non-ferrous metal, became incredibly important going into the late 18th and early 19th century for a variety of purposes. And we see one of those purposes illustrated well here, I believe. This is a fabulous model of HMS Victory dating from 1765. And it was found that ships of the Royal Navy fleet experienced problems with their timber hulls, particularly when sailing in the tropics, in the warmer seas, in the timber degrading through effects of burrowing shipworms. That is basically infestations degrading the timber work. Someone came up with the idea of cladding the hull below the waterline with individual copper plate sheets. And Victory was brought into dry dock in 1780 for just under 4,000 of those to be applied. And you can see those well represented within the model here. So a lot of ships were then subsequently plated in this way. And it not only preserved the hulls for longer, but enabled the ships to sail through the water quicker because of the resistance to barnacle incrustations, which disturb the water flow. Going on to tin, the Humboldt tin can, as we know and love it today, started back in the early 19th century. And here we have an example shown from 1810, the first of its type. It's basically iron plate, then not steel, as today, where the plate is, the iron plate is plated in tin, and then it's rolled, and then a top and bottom soldered into place. Copper and tin were important, or became important, industrial alloys for a whole manner of purposes, which came about as a result of the Industrial Revolution, and particularly in the manufacture of machine parts. And we see a fantastic Cornish type engine here with multiple copper and tin parts, particularly alloy parts, brass, bronze, phosphor bronze, and so on. Finally, we
Ainsley,
have, yep.
Ainsley, sorry to interrupt. People are saying in the chat that your mic keeps it, and well, I can hear it, so the mic keeps dipping in and out. I think
Does
it
it?
may just be if you're moving on a chair or something. I don't think it's anything major because most of
Okay.
the time it's fine.
Yeah, okay.
It just occasionally keeps fading away, so I'm not quite sure what's going on. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Chloe. I'll speak up a bit. It's probably me. Finally, we have arsenic. Now, arsenic is a semi-metal, and you can see from the two illustrations here, we have its usage as a poison, and on the right, as Paris green, as a paint. And it became very important for these uses, and also in medicines later on in the 19th century. So those are our three industrial metals and semi-metals, which are an important part of the World Heritage Site background. So how is the World Heritage Site defined on the ground? Well, the World Heritage Site is inscribed, it's designated through its physical features. That's the features that survive out in the landscape, which people can see and enjoy today. And the first of those, of course, is metalliferous mine sites. And that includes ore dressing sites and all the related features, engine houses and so on. Next one is mining related transportation. Minerals produced such as copper and tin had to be exported from Cornwall and West Devon. And those went out through industrial harbours, ports created or expanded for that purpose, and all through a series of mineral tramways and mineral railways constructed to link the mines to the ports. We have allied industries. As the mining industry expanded, a number of allied or ancillary industries were created to support the mining process, to support the industry. And that's principally here foundries and tin smelters, but there were others. Mining settlements and social infrastructure. As mining grew in importance, the relative wealth created by that led to the increase of settlements. The settlements grew in size, more cottages were built, and then eventually terraces and rows and so on. And also Methodism became increasingly important, and many non-conformist chapels were built right across the World Heritage Site. Mine workers' small holdings. These are basically defined as small subsistence style farms, usually around about 3 to 5 acres in size. As the mining population increased, of course, there were more mouths to feed, and landowners would lease small parcels of land to mine workers and their families to build a cottage, to create a small holding, and then use that to grow vegetables and raise livestock to support the family. So you would have subsistence farming being undertaken by a mining family alongside the actual work at mines as well. So they were sort of went along simultaneously in effect. Next, we have great houses and estates and gardens, land-owning families like the Bassets and the Williamses and so on, expanded the existing estates or built new ones and new grand houses as a result of the fabulous wealth that was generated through their involvement in either mining or possibly quite often allied industries as well. And finally, of the list here of the 7 attribute list, we have the mineralogical importance of Cornwall and West Devon and its impact on the science of mineralogy. The Cornwall and West Devon are blessed by fabulous inheritance of minerals, particularly non-ferrous minerals. And the Canubian ore field, as it's termed, has produced around about a dozen economically productive metals or semi-metals for production. And this concentration, this explosion of mining activity, particularly towards the end of the 18th century, shone a spotlight on Cornwall and Devon as areas for mineralogical study and specimen collection. So those are our 7 attributes by which the World Heritage Site is defined. So looking at those in turn in a little bit more detail, this is the first of those. This is mine sites. And we have at top left, we have the Taylor's pumping engine, the 90-inch Cornish type engine at East Pool and Agar mine at Pool between Campbell and Redruth. Top right, we have the extensive copper mine dumps of West Carridon mine with Craddock Moor mine in the background. And in the foreground, you can just make out the water of the reservoir pond for South Carridon mine. So on the tour at the bottom, we have a really distinctive 3-engine house set of Wheel Peaver. This site is just to the north of Redruth, and it has the once common site of three Cornish engine houses together. We'd have the crushing or stamps engine to the left, the pumping engine house in the middle, and the shaft winding engine to the right. Next, we have settlements. This is the Bedford Estate cottages in Tavistock in the Tamar Valley. As mining expanded greatly on the eastern bank of the Tamar, the Duke of Bedford, which had major mineral land holdings in the area, felt obliged in the 19th century to construct hundreds of workers' cottages to basically address the health issues that were being experienced by his mine workers and foundry workers at that time. And he produced and had built these very distinctive Bedford-style cottages with their distinctive porches. Transport infrastructure. This is an aerial view of Portreath Harbour on the North Cornish coast. And this shows the outer and inner harbour basins. This was a really important copper export area in the 19th century. And after 1819, all copper was exported from Cornwall to be smelted in South Wales, particularly in the Swansea area. So the Cornish fleet, the copper fleet, was established, which was in the region, I believe, of about 800 vessels in total, thereabouts. And these would ply the trade up to Swansea, up to South Wales, to deliver their copper ore. And then they return on the return trip laden with coal from the Welsh coal fields to power the various engines on the mines. Next one, we have mine workers' small holdings. This is taken at Carmanellis into the west of Cornwall. And basically, a small holding would comprise 3 or 4 very small fields, often irregularly shaped fields, and a little cottage, rather like the one shown in inset there, would have been constructed by the mine worker and his family in order to be, that's their place of residence, their dwelling. And this is a very particularly distinctive set of small holdings in that area. The science of mineralogy. This is an example of the copper sulfide mineral, the talcite. And this is what is termed as the type locality for this particular mineral. Type locality basically is shorthand for the area where that particular mineral type was first identified and named, and it's named after metallic mine, surprise, surprise, and particularly the Wheel Cocks section. It was discovered in 1865. And there are over 30 type locality minerals in Cornwall today. And in fact, one was identified and named as kernelite only towards the end of last year. Next, we have grand houses, grand estates. This is Scoria House at Scoria, and this is the country residence of the Williams family, who were major industrial entrepreneurs. Next, we have Allied Industries. This is a slide showing three very important foundries, engineering works within the World Heritage Site. Top left, we have the Harvey's Foundry Barn Complex at Harvey's in Hale, a very important steam engine manufacturing site in the 19th century. Top right, we have Bedford, or later Tavistock Iron Foundry, as it was known, now converted to apartments. Again, this also made steam engineering and many mine tools of various types. And finally, at the bottom, we have Perron Foundry, which was established in 1791, which again produced steam engines of various types, pumping engine, winding engines, and so forth, and also a multitude of Cornish mining tools. Going into that particular aspect a little bit more, Cornwall experienced a lot of innovation in around mining and mining technology, and this is probably the most important of those, and this illustration shows that well, I think. This is the Cornish type beam engine, as it became known, essentially, and this is essentially a hybrid James Watt type of engine, where it has the separate condenser, which is the feature you can see on bottom right here, and the steam cylinder is to the left. This was developed in its high pressure form by the Camborne engineer Richard Trevithick and his various compatriots. And it basically took the James Watt approach of condensing the steam in a separate vessel, but applied high pressure steam to this. Cutting a long story short, this made the whole process, the whole operation of the engine far more efficient, and far more efficient in terms of it much reduced the amount of coal used during its operation. I've included a quote here by Professor William Pole from his 1844 treatise on the Cornish pumping engine, and this quote sums it up really well, I think, which says, "The saving of fuel in this engine has been carried to such an extent as it leaves far behind the utmost attempts at economy made by any other kind of engine." So we can see there by the middle 19th century that basically this particular kind of pumping engine particularly was at the acme, the zenith of steam pumping engine development. Looking a little bit further into that, this is top left, you can see 144-inch diameter pumping engine cylinder made for the Kruquist pumping engine at Haarlemmermeer in Holland in 1849. And this is built by the Harvey's foundry. And you can see it's a truly massive engine cylinder. The one here shown it was understood to be a casting error. It had a flaw in its casting, and then was just put on display, I believe, on site for a number of years. But it was replaced by a properly cast version, which now sits underneath the shiny cylinder cap, which can be seen in the picture on the right. So this is underneath this, and this engine and its two sister engines unwatered this area, and I believe the modern day Schiphol Airport is now built upon land reclaimed by this particular dewatering set of engines. Top right, you can just about make out the Harvey's maker's name, which is applied to this engine, and again, it's a proud statement, I think, of Cornish engineering prowess at that time. Finally, on the engineering side of it, before we move on, I couldn't help but include this fine illustration of the Cornish Stamps Some mining technology was acquired from European countries and then either repurposed or perfected, as in this case, where this particular form of ore crushing machinery, the Cornish Stamps, went or became in use not just throughout Cornwall and Britain, but right across the world. And here, this illustration is particularly interesting, I think, because not only does it show the Cornish Stamps in fine detail, but it also includes a mine worker, shown to the left here, with his foot on his banjo shovel, but he's got a wide-brimmed hat, and in the background you can see a number of what look to be palm trees, which definitely kind of points to more sunnier climes. And I think that speaks volumes about Harvey's commercial ambitions and commercial outlook at the time. They weren't just looking to sell their wares to local mines and local industry, or even industry elsewhere in Britain, but they were looking to the wide world. And we'll see a little bit more of that now. So mining migration, the international dimension. This is an excellent historic postcard photograph taken around 1900. This is Redruth railway station. And we can see a steam on the up line. This is going eastwards. And we can see a mass of people, mine workers in this instance, on the up platform, getting ready to board this particular train. This was a weekly activity at Redruth at this time, and these were on the way to go to ports to get steamers to go across to the gold and diamond mines in South Africa. You can see their relatives, their wives and families on the pavement above. And this is quite a poignant scene, because you know, the men folk would have been gone for months, many months, if not longer, and it must have been quite a wrench to say goodbye to family members for a long period of time. So I apologise for the very small print on this particular map. But if you go to our World Heritage Site website, you can download the PDF of this and see it in much better detail. But in essence, it's an attempt made back in the early 2000s to illustrate just some of the sites around the world with international Cornish connections. This data was compiled by Dr. Sharon Schwartz when she was a member of the World Heritage Site team in the early 2000s, when the bid for World Heritage Site status was being prepared. And this map was put together again using that information. Again, this is dated somewhat, and though there were 175 approximate sites identified at that time, the number now is known to be, you know, considerably in excess of this. I understand Dr. Schwartz is giving a presentation next Thursday, so I'll definitely be interested to tune in for that. Promises to be a good one. Looking around the world again, pictorially, again, I very much like Cornish engines and Cornish engine houses, and here we see some excellent examples in those places where the Cornish got to. Top right, or top left, sorry, we have Allies mine. This is right on the Salhees and particularly Mountain mine in West Cork in the far southwest of Ireland. This became quite an important copper mining district from the early 19th century. Next to that, we have Pachuca in Mexico. And this is a fine engine house on the outskirts of that particular city. Again, a silver mining area here. To the right of that, we have the pumping engine at Moonta Mine in South Australia. Again, this became a fabulously important copper mining area from the 1840s. And then finally, we have a night shot of, again, a Cornish type engine house at Linares in Andalusia. And this one's really nicely lit, which is a great view. Bottom left, we have O'Keep mine, or O'Keep mine. So apologise for my appalling pronunciation. And this is in South Africa, in Namaqualand. And this has a Harvey's 50-inch pumping engine in its original house. and is understood to be the only engine of this type still in situ in the southern hemisphere. To the right of that, we have what's left of the mine pumping engine at Cornwall in New Zealand, again another copper mining area. And to the right of that, we have finally Virgin Gorda in the British Virgin Islands. And this particular engine here, again, was brought over by a team of mine workers from, principally from Sodostol. And again, it's another copper mining district. So very briefly, why did Cornish mine workers migrate? Well, basically, Cornish miners have been using their skills at mines across the British Isles from the 1700s. At the start of the 19th century, of course, the mining industry here was thriving, and the developments related to the Industrial Revolution, and particularly those concerning the development of high-pressure steam power, had a profound impact internationally, and that reputation for excellence grew. Richard Trevithick pioneered the export of his high-pressure steam engines from 1814, and this was marked the first introduction of this technology in South America. Again, as mining fields opened up around the world, across the continents, Cornish mine workers took advantage of these opportunities for better pay and conditions, and took their skills and technology with them. This migration has led to a multitude of communities around the globe today, which still proudly celebrate their Cornish heritage. And there are estimated to be in excess of 6 million people worldwide of Cornish descent. Finally, I've included a lovely painting by John Linnell from 1816 of Richard Trevithick himself. And this is particularly interesting, I think, because he's pointing over his shoulder to the Peruvian Andes, where he first took his steam engines. And it is interesting to think that all of that migration, all of those descendants basically stem from his activities starting in 1814. At this stage in the presentation, I'd like to introduce our new World Heritage Site website. It's at www.cornishmining.org.uk, and I encourage you to have a good look at this later if you've not already done so. When this was launched at the end of last year, we used the opportunity to put out a call for members of the diaspora community, basically to contact us and share their stories. And they were fantastic, and we've had many letters back and much detailed correspondence. And I'd like to use the next few slides to present the responses of some of those, very much in their own words. So first up, we have a response from California in the USA. And here we have an historic shot of Grass Valley, a settlement that was established after gold mining was first discovered there and pursued in 1848, particularly on tributaries of the Sacramento River and the American River. The proud lady with the fantastic tray of Cornish pasties is a lady called Kitty Quayle, and she lives at Placerville, which is just to the south of Grass Valley, and these are her words. I live in Gold Rush area town, Placerville, in the heart of California Motherlode, in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountain range. The immediate past president of the California Cornish Cousins, and they have their own website and Facebook accounts. Herbert Henry Harry, my maternal grandfather, was the 14th, 15th children, 9 achieving adulthood. Was born to Richard Harry and his wife Mary Louise Roos Harry. Richard had come from the little village of Godolphin Cross in Bragg Parish and was one of 5 brothers who immigrated in 1860. The California Cornish Cousins is a statewide group dedicated to stimulating interest in keeping alive Cornish traditions here in the Golden State, and it was established in 1991. In June, we held 3-day gatherings in different places of historical interest to share genealogy and our love of Cornwall. Each autumn we get together to pounce on a pasty at our fall pasty luncheon, which often makes the pasties, saffron buns and heather cake from family recipes handed down. So it's a great event. Our membership spans the state, from San Diego by the southern border to the redwood forests in the far north county, San Francisco Bay in the west, to the Motherlode on the flanks of the mountains to the east. We also participate in Grass Valley St. Piran's Day celebration in March. And she says, we may be third generation native Californians, but our roots in Kerno are deep and solid. She goes on to say, my mother was very proud of being Cornish and raised the 8 of us kids to share a love of Cornwall and all things Cornish. We had a framed map of Cornwall on the wall in our home. We taught the correct pronunciation of Mousel, had pasties, saffron buns, and held big family cousin Jack reunions with all the aunts, uncles, cousins, and grands. Mom worked in our family history for as long as I can remember, and before the internet, she and her dad made a couple of trips across the pond to facilitate that research. She self-published 2 books and had an encyclopedic knowledge. Across the world to South Australia, mining for copper here in this particular Australian state started in the 1840s, and the picture top right shows the Graves pumping engine house with the later open cast pit beyond. I've included this particular excerpt from the Royal Cornwall Gazette from 1853 because I think it sets into context some of the links between Cornwall and West Devon and mining communities and mines, across the other side of the world. And it says, Falmouth Express, emigration. The ship Caroline is now about sailing from Falmouth with a staff of Cornish miners, mechanics and officers to resume the working of the Strathalbyn copper mines in Australia. Strathalbyn mines are to the just to the south of Adelaide, I believe. They have with them from 500 to 600 tons of tools and machinery of every description to give the mines a fair and spirited trial. Machineries from the firms of Messrs. Nichols and Williams and Co., the Bedford Iron Works in Tavistock, and you saw the picture of that earlier, and Perrin Foundry, Cornwall, and again you saw the picture of that also. The staff is chiefly from the Tavistock district, again in West Devon. Chief Engineer and Manager J.W. Bassett Esquire will be assisted by W. Thompson Esquire in his assaying operations. That's basically testing the mineral value of the ore mined. Again, that shows the interconnectedness of both mine workers, engineering foundries, and mines around the globe. On to South Australia. Now I've got to check my pronunciation here. This is from a response from a gentleman called Lance Hocking, and he lives at Carrakalinga on the Florio Peninsula. I think I've got that right. Apologies if I haven't. And he says, greetings from Carrakalinga on the Florio Peninsula, about 45 miles south of the Adelaide in the state of South Australia. I am 3rd generation Australian on my Cornish line. My great-great-grandparents were Richard and Frances Hocking from Lelant and William and Loveday Rowe from Ludgvan. By Richard and William came from farming backgrounds, but many of their children ended up in the mining pursuits in England, America, and Australia. My great-grandparents, Edmund Hocking and Elizabeth Hocking, nee Rowe, married on the 20th of September 1865 at the registry office in the district of Penzance. Elizabeth's brother, John Rowe, married Mary Painter on the same day as St Ives. Edmund, aged 23 years, and Elizabeth, aged 17 years, together with John and Mary Rowe, then 8, later boarded the ship Gosforth and Plymouth. Sorry if I'm stumbling over some of this reading, but I can't read the right-hand part of the text because some of your faces are covering it. Apologies for that. They departed 3rd of October 1865 at Port Adelaide, arrived on the 23rd of December 1865. This is a lovely photograph, a studio photograph of Elizabeth Hocking. Edmund was injured in a mining accident at Cadia Gold Mine in the early 40s and was unable to work again. He passed away in 1902 at the age of 60 years. Elizabeth carried on raising a younger son and even grandchildren. She grew vegetables and kept milking, can't read that, and also performed midwife duties as part of her community. She lived to 80 years, passing away in 1988. I moved to Adelaide with my family in 1989, returning to the origins of our family in Australia. Since living there, I've come to understand just how Cornish South Australia is and how deep the roots of Cornwall still run here. Across to another state in Australia, this is Victoria, and this is particularly an interesting historic photograph of mine workers at the New Chum mine on the Victorian goldfields, and mining for gold started here in earnest in 1851. Here we have a statue of Cornish miner at Bendigo in Victoria. And Leanne Lloyd has contacted the World Heritage Site Office and says, I'm writing from from Bendigo in central Victoria, Australia, in a place which we call the Cornish heart of Victoria. Bendigo has a very strong Cornish history, and our background forebearers were the background of the mining industry here. Bendigo and our nation has been built on their blood, sweat and tears. I'm a fifth generation Cornish descendant, but feel very connected to Kerno and ancestors. Over 26 years ago, I commenced Cornish Pioneers of Bendigo and District. It has been an ongoing labour of love to record as many Cornish-born pioneers who spent time here in Bendigo and to record their names for these and future generations. And there is Leanne with her partner Robert Lloyd in 2011. She goes on to say, Cornwall is unique, and for those with Cornish ancestry who live outside of Cornwall, it is a very special place and very dear to our hearts. I can remember the first visit to Cornwall when I felt so connected, walking around the ground my ancestors would have walked. It is always an emotional homecoming when we return to Cornwall to visit. Although we reside and promote the Cornish in Bendigo, we support all other Cornish endeavours here in Australia and where possible beyond Australia. Across the other side of the world again to Canada and North America. Here, copper mining was first discovered in the 1840s in the newly created province of Canada, as it was called then. It's now Ontario, and this came out in a very important copper mining area. Here we see a photograph of Bruce Mines from the Virtual Museum of Canada, and the Toronto Cornish Association contacted us and said the first miners to arrive here were new immigrants from Cornwall, bringing their expertise of hard rock mining, establishing Canada's future commercial copper mine, or first commercial copper mine, sorry. Until well into the 1860s, all the miners were Cornish, but this was a hard and lonely experience. It is no wonder that most miners had something for their Cornwall families by 1850. Following the closure of the mines in 1876, most of the miners and their families headed west to the mining camps where the Cornish were already well represented. Finally, he states that the Toronto Cornish Association was established in 1873. This was the time of the Great Migration. A similar organisation was established within Cornish diasporas in Canada, South Africa, South Australia, and New South Wales to provide and support. Later in the early 1900s, these same organisations morphed into groups of second and third generation cousin Jacks and Jennies who wished to keep alive Cornish customs and celebrate Cornish achievements. Right, finally, as we sort of to round up the presentation, I'd like to sort of put a sort of a personal spin on things, if I could. This is a particular story from the World Heritage Site Office here in Cornwall. The presentation trophy, the cup that you see on the left there, relates to Sam Ham, and this is the story of a Cornish wrestling miner as experienced by members of the World Heritage Site Office. Back in July 2009, Cormac, a worker working for the organisation called Cormac in Cornwall, called Paul Richards, was doing some ground engineering works at a siting tucking mill, which is just on the outskirts of Campbell, at that time, and he uncovered this fantastic trophy just in the mine spoil that he was digging over at that time. The inscription on the trophy refers to wrestling Cornish style, and the cup being won by a Sam Ham. The cup also refers to a manor house at Jepstown in South Africa, and Jepstown is a modern day suburb of Johannesburg. A close up on the inscription there reveals it in a little bit more detail. Wrestling Cornish Style, won by Sam Ham, Manor House, Jepstown, South Africa. This was too good an opportunity to miss, so we undertook a little bit of research, and we got a very good friend of mine involved, genealogist Stephen Cornwall involved, and his work revealed Sam Ham to be a mine worker from the Camborne area who had travelled to South Africa to work. Records held by the Cornish Wrestling Association here in Cornwall indicate that Sam was a wrestler of some note. Cornishman newspaper here in Cornwall for September 1910 records Sam as having attained the middleweight championship of South Africa in that year. Quite an achievement, I think. The Cornish Wrestling Association also holds a number of photographs of Sam Ham, and here at the bottom he's shown posing with a fellow Cornish wrestler, T. Pierce, taken in a photographic studio in Redruth. Sam, during his wrestling life, went on to win other trophies for wrestling, and one is held by a relative of his, Marlene Roberts, who lives in Victoria, Australia. Descendants of Sam, Frank and Brian Butler, again originally of Camborne, were able to confirm the story and add useful detail. My colleague Karen Willows of the World Heritage Site Office, after all of this had been put together, arranged for the trophy to be returned to the family, and a presentation was arranged at the Cornwall Centre, Redruth, on Tuesday the 30th of March 2010. And Kim Cooper and the Cornwall Centre staff were excellent in facilitating this. And the pictures here show, the top picture shows Frank Butler, I believe, on the left, receiving the trophy from Paul Richards on the right, the worker who discovered it originally. And in the bottom, you can see Brian and Frank at the back with other members of the Butler family. Okay, that's essentially it. To find out more about the Cornish mining diaspora, please do visit the Cornish mining website, which is a brand spanking new. And why not also take up the opportunity to become one of our tributors? That's what we call our members, and you can sign up for our exclusive World Heritage Site online membership by looking at the links within the address below, www.cornishmining.org.uk. So hopefully you'll look at that and continue your explorations into Cornish mining heritage. Thank you.
Thank you, Ainsley. That's fascinating.